Representative, good to see you again here. Let's start with the cooling of tensions in Minneapolis. Tom Homan, the border czar for President Trump, announced that a plan to reduce the number of immigration agents there in Minneapolis. Do you expect this to work? Because everyone seems to welcome it.
Well, they have to do something in Minneapolis. You know, what's been happening, this escalation of tensions by ICE terrorizing the citizenry of Minnesota is just unacceptable. You can't have these rogue gangs of masked men going into daycares and just shooting and killing and executing American citizens on the street of this country. So something needs to happen. I don't know if we'll see what they actually do. If they have a material de-escalation, I hope that they do.
One of the reasons for the drawdown, Tom Homan said, is that Minnesota agreed to allow ICE agents to arrest people in jail there in Minnesota who are awaiting trial, criminals who are awaiting trial. Do you think that cooperation should have happened sooner, though?
Well, you know, the question is, should you be deported if you've never been convicted of a crime or not? You know, that goes back to due process issues that are, you know, material in this discussion. That's one of the reasons we're having such a debate of members who voted to, you know, violate due process rights and allow those deportations without actual convictions. So, you know, it's going to be an interesting thing. Obviously, no one wants violent criminals here in this country. If you're a violent criminal and you violate that law, then you should be absolutely deported. The question is, at what point in the process should you be convicted, or should you just have an allegation? And I think that's where the distinction comes into place.
In the background to all this is that letter from the Attorney General Pam Bondi telling Minnesota that that she would help withdraw federal agents if Minnesota gave up its voter rolls, something that Texas has already done for its 18 million or so voters. What do you think this is really about? Is it about immigration and security, or is this about something else?
It is outrageous what that letter is and what Pam Bondi has done. You know, I sit on elections as well as Homeland Security, and our committees have jointly demanded that she come and testify to explain this extortion of voter rolls and the private data of the voters in this country for ICE. Can you even imagine a situation where our government is going to send rogue masked, militia forces to execute citizens, terrorize children, all this stuff, because they have an alternative motive? They're desperately afraid of losing this election in November, and they're trying to get the voter rolls to be able to come back in behind states and cancel people's voter registrations and prohibit voting access. It is unconscionable. It is so undemocratic, and everyone in this country needs to be outraged by what is happening. I mean, it is jaw-dropping. It's a brazen abuse of power and a brazen violation of our constitutional rights in this country.
I've heard that theory from Democrats that they're afraid that the administration might try to cancel out people's votes. I mean, that's been talked about here in Democratic counties in Texas. But all elections are held at the county level. I mean, states, or federal government or states can't require a county to cancel out a vote. They can advise and say, we have questions about this individual, but they can't force somebody to kill their registration, can they?
Well, I think they're going to try. This administration knows no limits. I think we've already seen the line of jaw-dropping behavior by this administration keep getting moved. And, you know, Trump just the other day had a meeting with House Republicans and says we have to win because they're going to impeach me if I don't. And they've been desperately trying to do whatever they can. You know, attacking the integrity of our elections has been a pillar of Trump and his MO and what his minions have been trying to do to sow distrust in our electoral system. And this is just another brazen attempt to manipulate election data. I cannot even believe it. You're absolutely right. There's a hardcore separation in our Constitution over who is responsible for elections. And elections and election data are governed by the states and not the federal government. There's absolutely no reason why the FBI, Pam Bondi, needs access to Texas voter rolls. The fact that Greg Abbott did that is such a betrayal of the trust of Texans. I think more people need to be talking about this.
Congress is going to have hearings on what happened up in Minneapolis a little later this month. What do you expect to come out of these, if anything?
Well, hopefully we'll get some actual accountability. You know, it would be nice if Republicans would actually put these folks under oath. You know, that's I think a travesty to the American people that they're not sworn in before they testify. But yes, And Homeland Security, I'm pleased that the chairman of our committee has finally demanded that the head of ICE, CBP, and USCIS are going to come and testify before us on February 10th. I will be there with bells on, ready to go, to hear what they have to say and ask tough, pointed questions. That we need to hold them accountable. You know, they have to come and report to Congress. It's our job. They want us to give them money to do their job, right? We control the powers of the purse, so they have an obligation to come. It's long overdue for them to come before our committee. It's really unfortunate, actually, that it took the execution of a Minnesota resident to get them to come to testify before Congress. That it took the killing of American citizens for them to come and hold their agency accountable. So they're going to have some tough questions, and we'll be interested to see, but they have to make some reforms. What's happening with ICE, how they're terrorizing our cities across this country is unacceptable.
Let's talk about funding for DHS here, Department of Homeland Security. You know, Democrats in the Senate say, listen, we were not going to approve funding for them until changes happen. What specific changes are Democrats looking to carve out of the budget at DHS?
Well, I think there's probably some different perspectives from the Senate and the House. You know, according to what was reported from the Senate yesterday, they want, unmasking, they want body cameras, they want stuff like that. I think, for at least from my perspective, I want a complete de-escalation of this personnel to get out of these roaming gangs of people just driving around in random pickup trucks through cities. And some vigilante mission. I think this whole effort needs to be descaled back. These people need to be terminated from ICE, and we need to cease these type of programs immediately. And they need to focus back on the core mission of our actual ports of entry and that sort of thing.
If funding doesn't happen for the Department of Homeland Security, I mean, ICE and Customs and Border Patrol agents would still be able to go to work. There's emergency funding to keep them out there to secure the country. Would this have the effect that Democrats want?
Well, you're right in that Trump would have the ability to continue funding things because they've already had appropriated funds, but they still do need to be authorized by Congress, and these funds will run out, and they do need to have the appropriations process go through because there's a lot of issues that come through the DHS budget. And that would be impacted by a lack of a funding and appropriations bill. So in the short term, yes, they would still have funding, but in the long term, it would have much broader implications. And so, you would like to see a funding bill. We want to fund the government. We want to have our government up and going. We certainly have key programs that need to be taken care of, but we cannot fund ICE in its current state, and we cannot fund what their current mission is. And so that has to change. And their scope of work has to materially change. And with the elimination of these raids through our cities, the way they're doing it, without reckless disregard for the safety of the American people and a gross violation in the trampling of our constitutional rights to protest and free speech in this country.
When we're talking about funding DHS, let's talk about the politics of this for a moment. Republicans have been very successful, as you know, in the past, about accusing Democrats of wanting to defund the police. Does it concern you that Democrats might be setting themselves up for this in an election year?
These words defund and stuff, those are hot button words. But at the end of the day, I think Democrats have a moral compass and the moral clarity on this issue. People are outraged at what is happening with these Gestapo raids of ICE agents, these clusters of people who have these just willful, this abuse towards the American people, this arrogance that they can come in and say, you can't film me, you can't exercise your right, and I'm going to torture you if you do. These intimidations, these brutal, excessive uses of force. The American people are over it, and they're not happy with it. This is not what people want. This is not how our government should function. And I think that we're on the right side of this issue.
No concern at all about the politics as we close in on here the election?
Well, that's all I hear. All I can tell you is, as a member of Congress, people have no hesitations reaching out and communicating with our office. I've had thousands of communications from people right here in DFW, from the constituents of Texas 32, demanding that we rein ICE in and that we stop what is happening. So from what I'm hearing on the ground from my folks, they don't want us to fund it. They want it over.
want to ask about a story in the Texas Tribune the other day, and Politico had it as well too. You used to trade a lot of stocks as a member of Congress. A lot of members of Congress do this as well. Last summer, though, you decided to sell much of that. Now you are proposing requiring members to divest all of their stocks while in Congress. Why the sudden change on this issue?
There's not, I would hardly say that's a sudden change. When I get to Congress, I signed on to a stock ban. I do believe in that. I think transparency and public service is important. There's no secret that I had, a successful career before coming to Congress. And I absolutely had investable assets, just like many people do. You have 401k plans. You have people that manage that. I've instructed my folks to, do that divesting process, and they've been doing that all year long. These attacks are just a blatant regard because, my opponent in this race is trying to take some cheap political shots because he refused to lead on this issue. He had opportunities to sign on stock trading bans when he was in Congress and failed to do that. And we have the receipts to prove it. And he's losing in this race, and so he's trying to desperately, attack me on an issue there's no there there. The reality of it is I have been divesting my stocks. I've been trying to do the right thing. I've signed on to the stock trading ban. I'm leading on this issue. And I think that's what my people see. And I've heard that from my constituents, and they're proud of what I'm doing.
But you have traded in the past, which a lot of members of Congress do. And now you've decided not to trade anymore. There seems like there was a change on this issue. Was there not?
Well, no, I think it's about trading before I came to Congress. If you look at my history, I've been selling stocks this whole time. I had a very complicated portfolio. I had lots of independent money managers that manage my assets, and they've been in this process of converting my assets to non-individually stock held things. I think that's what you want to do. The answer is, hey, we don't want Congress to hold stocks. Okay, I'll sell mine. And then, oh, how dare you sell your stocks? It's the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard. The reality of it is, I've committed to this. I'm signing on to stock plans, and I'm putting my own actions into place to follow what I believe, which is I think we should have transparency in government, and people shouldn't do it. And I'm getting out of it myself.
We're a month away from the primary here. What do internal polls show about where you stand right now?
We're excited about where our internal polls are. We've done stuff in our shows that we have a strong lead in this race. And I think that's why you see my opponents taking a lot of cheap shots, because they know that we're ahead in the polls. And have a lot of support on the ground. I have over 120 endorsements in this race from everyone from labor to the U.S. Chamber, from the Medical Association to Latino groups and members of Congress to local officials to precinct chairs and everything in between, from ideological spectrums of the most conservative Democrats to the most progressive Democrats, because people who've served with me side by side realize that I'm the best fit for this district and that I'm the one that truly fights. And so you see my opponents treating, ankle biting me and taking cheap shots because they know that we have a strong lead in this case. We're looking forward to winning in March.
Representative, good to see you again. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you.